Hello, today we're talking about some of the new mechanics in 0.8. I've got 10 examples for you. First thing you might have noticed is that there is a crouch mechanic. There's also a prone mechanic. So I'm tapping C to enter crouch, and I'm holding down C to enter prone. So now, aside from crouching and prone, we also have sliding. So this is a component. But you can see there, I naturally slid underneath this. And also, just getting close or touching an asset with that sliding component, it allows me to enter the sliding, which then, if I stop moving for whatever reason, it immediately puts me in prone. Now, one of the most anticipated additions to 0.8 was swimming. With swimming, you have full control over your character, and depending on the animations, will allow you to seamlessly move within 3D space as the player. It's worth noting that you need to go up and down using the camera and using WASD, but you can also go double speed by holding down Shift. In order to toggle swimming for your game, you'll want to go to Global Parameters, Controller, and then scroll down in this behavior section and make sure swimming enabled is toggled to true. Now with 0.8, we were also granted a new logic asset. So this asset is specifically used for logic. You can try and put it in your games, you can try and make it visible. However, it's only going to be on your game development side. Tab it back in and out, and it immediately hides itself. So for us as game developers, from what I've been told, these assets are optimized for game development. They have no faces. So by comparison, they're going to be better than any asset for communicating through behaviors and components, such as these archaic number pads. What you say? However, they're not easy to interact with, so keep that in mind and likely still use some signs or your own personal assets for things that you can interact with. Next mechanic on our list that you should totally tinker with is the VFX. So we have a whole catalog of visual effects, all based on your graphics system. So the better your computer can handle these graphics, the more you can incorporate into a game. But you can turn it on and you can turn it off. From area of effects such as dust for 30 meters, or even trail effects, which you can attach a pickable component and take it and run. Oh, hot, 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 hot. Hot, 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 hot. I highly recommend checking out Tempest Studios' gallery if you want to view them all, so you can easily understand what each one does. So the visual VFX, we can choose as a single player, client side only. But if you have a multiplayer behavior, you're going to want to send and receive messages through multiplayer components or other behaviors. What's nice is you can see all my settings here. If I were to go from multiplayer to single player for whatever reason, it keeps those settings. However, for now, we're going to be sticking with the synchronized version of visual effect. With any of these visual effects, you can enable them at the start of the game, or you can have them turn on and off through messages, which I've got set up for us. In the speaker component, you can see when the player interacts with it, I'm sending out an interact.1 message, and that's going to everyone in range. Some of the new things of speaker component, while we're looking at it, is you can have it rotate on a duration. That will play any associated message after the rotation duration. And we can see we have a filterable tag system, so we can broadcast to everyone in range, much like the message broadcaster, or we can send it to all or specific tags or actors. And then the last thing to note with the speaker is you can also set it to forever or duration. If you set it to duration, that will give you an editable number for a duration, whereas with forever, it will continue on until it is destroyed. So if you attach, let's say, a health component or a plant behavior, you would be able to destroy this forever message. For now, we're keeping them as once. Just a quick look at this one. This is also sending out a message interact.2. So we're able to turn on and off our visual effect. Now, the last thing to demonstrate with the visual effect is the attributes. We can see here that we have a whole slew of attributes that we can test with our fire. So if I wanted to change the color, I can add that, and we can change the color here. We can see now it's giving us a rainbow-like effect. I could also perhaps change the scale. We'll double it, 10 times it. You can add some really nice effects, and the preview automatically updates here in the edit mode, so you don't have to toggle in and out. I highly recommend checking out the attributes for each one and really customize it to your game. Now, much like those visual effects, we have post-processing effects that have a preview and a restore, so we can already demonstrate what that effect might do in our game. It comes with some already predefined profiles that you can tab between. Check them all out. We have grunge, vintage, black and white, psychedelic, and custom, so you can have a custom post-processing effect to make your experience really stand out. The difference here is you can have this automatic to where it's already using this effect throughout your game, or you can have it triggered by a message. So for now, we have it triggered by a message. If you do use a message trigger, you'll want to also have a second post-process behavior that on its own message will change it back to default. One thing we'll demonstrate with this effect is arguments. So we can set up an argument to fade that post-processing effect. So the post-process fade, any of these yellow messages are called arguments. And so by using this argument, post-process fade, and setting it up beforehand with the speaker component, which we can see it gave us that drop down to input the time of 4 seconds, which we can adjust up to 10 or beyond. It'll allow us to have a nice subtle effect here. And of course, we can clear it or go the opposite direction. However, you cannot interrupt it, so we do have to wait the entire duration. Alright, so now we're going to be looking at lights. So a light can vary from a point light to a spotlight. So the difference is pretty apparent here. A point light is much like the sun. It's round. It'll radiate light from the origin. Objects, such as this wall, will still bounce the light off of it, and light will not pass through it. As for a spotlight, that will make your light more directional. A good use for this might be a lamp. You can also turn it to face different directions. So taking a look at the settings of these lights, we can see that they have an intensity. They have a range. So that'll be the distance that it affects. The fall off. So I'll give it much like a fading effect around the edges or corners. We can change the angle of the spotlight, so we can make it more of a stage light if you prefer. And we can also change the color. And using the entire color wheel here, you can also paste in a hex code. Lastly, we have a subtractive view, which looks fantastic with a white light, which is perfect for making shadows. And of course, you could turn it on and off through messages. Alright, so the next thing I'll show you, now that we understand the arguments, or these yellow messages, is that we also can change the weather. So using the multiplayer weather switcher, we can change between weathers in-game. You can also make a custom weather if you prefer. With the custom settings, you can change anything from the colors of the sky itself, to the fog, power and density, to the sun color and size, to the moon color and size, stars, and even the clouds themselves. And what we'll be doing is we're going to use the weather fade message and communicating with specific tags. So for now, I've set up a desert, I've set up a night, and we can see here I've added a night tag, and it's using the same message. Of course, you can also toggle this wait for message on and off, so that it's automatically swapping to night when your game begins. And lastly, much like that post-processing, we can have a neutral effect to restore it back to normal. So I've set up those weather fade messages with these interactable objects in front of them, whereby interacting with them, it's going to send out the weather fade message over a 3-second argument time, and it's broadcasting specifically to the tags we've set up. So this interactable will send to the desert tag the weather fade message. This interactable will send a 4-second argument time to the night tag. And finally, this third asset is going to send that weather fade of a 4-second argument time to the neutral tag. It's also worth noting we have arguments preset for audio where you can play, stop, and pause it with a fade. And there's also a preset light color fade. So if you wanted to, you could change a light to a different color. So we can see my light gradually transition. Next up, we're going to talk about timed events. So I've set up a little course here. Let's go ahead and see what happens when I touch this sign. When I touch it, I'll start running. We'll get fences that pop up, and then the Lambro beats me to the finish line. So behind the scenes, this sign, when I interact with it, It's waiting for that interaction, but then it's going to toggle my fences on, sending out the timed.event.1. Then, after that, there's a sub-event of the fences being toggled off, which is sending out a message, timed.event2. What's nice about the timed event behavior is that whenever you add a new event or the beginning event, it has an event name so you can easily sort your events. You can also add sub-events, such as my fences being toggled on or toggled off. I've also got a second event, so the car is toggled on timed.event.3, and it's toggled off on timed.event.4. So with each one of these timed events, we can see that there's a time associated with it. This all happens sequentially after I interact with the sign. So the timed event.1 is the first thing to happen after 1 second. After another 1 second, timed event.2 goes out. Our car is then toggled on after an additional 2 seconds. And then finally, the car is toggled off after the final 2 seconds. So all in all, I have a 6-second timed event. And we can take a quick look at the assets themselves, both of which have a basic platform and a toggle. It's worth noting that the toggle behavior now has multiple messages, so I can have multiple turn-on messages. With what we've learned about timed events, now we're going to take a look at crowd events. Crowd events are synchronized behaviors that can be put in your single-player game if you choose, that when a message is received, such as interacting with the sign, triggers a custom user interface. For this one, we were supposed to pose for a selfie before the bridge fell.
Oh no!
So behind the scenes here, we have our bridge, which uses that timed event that we just tried. So after 5 seconds of interacting with the sign, our bridge is toggled on because the message is being sent out. And then after 2 seconds, so a sub-event, after 2 seconds, the bridge is toggled off. We'll take a quick look at the sign, which is basically sending out that crowd.interact message that triggered that timed event. And then finally, this logic asset is using the crowd event. So the crowd event starts when that message is received, and we can even have a title, a point goal, auto progression. We can change the color. We can have a reward at the end. We can toggle whether the participants receive the visual effect or if it's at a point within range. We can see we can offset it if we prefer. And then finally, we can adjust what emote is required for that crowd event. So for me, I set it up for us to pose for a selfie as the emote that was required to successfully complete the crowd event. So let's try that. So we've got bridge fall. So once that title is removed, so the title does last a while. So I'm gonna remove the title for now. And so the bridge will fall. I need to pick the selfie button. Oh no. Ah! 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 So I'll touch the sign and then pose a selfie. After a little bit of testing, I believe the area VFX are your best option, but you can apply the VFX to participants as well as any characters within range. Unfortunately, you can't customize these effects, so that's why the area might be your best option. So much like timed events, we also have animated decorations that once activated, they can play sequentially. You no longer have to fake a timeline of animations. So for example, I have Mary here who eats an apple, and she's going to play that eating loop twice and then take a nap. Oops. So taking a look at Mary's animated decoration, we can see by default she's idle. So that idle is on an infinite loop playing at start. However, it's interruptible whenever an apple comes near. So she's going to start eating whenever the apple is in range. She's going to play it twice. So this is an important addition. You do need to change the play count. By default, it's set at 0, but you're going to want to put it at 1 or higher. For now, she's at 2. And then, when she finishes that second eating rotation, she sends out eat.apple.2, which then triggers the death animation. And that is started on eat.apple.2, and it plays 1 time. Finally, she was detecting that apple through a speaker component, which the speaker component was displayed for 4 seconds above her head, and it's when she detected the apple. It's important to note here that assets can now send messages to themselves. So she sent that starting message, eat.apple.1, which then kicked off her sequential series of events. And with our apple/egg here, all it had was a pickable component, an indicator that said, hey, pick me up, and then just the tag apple. Bleh. Uh-oh. The final behavior we'll talk about today is actor property switcher. So this is in the multiplayer behaviors, and what it does is upon message, removes or changes the collision and visibility of an asset. So we have Jet here, who when we interact with him, is going to remove his collision and his visibility. So right now I can push Jet around.
Fight back! Fight back!
But when I talk to him, he says, I'm going ghost. It's worth noting that that did every asset within range. So we're probably going to want to change it to where it's only specific tags. So we can edit the logic and we can change the range or the filter mode to specific tags, and it'll just be him, so just Jet. So now rather than take the entire city with him, when we talk to Jet, he'll turn invisible and he'll say, I'm going ghost. And we can walk through him. You can also set that to be a toggled behavior so that when I interact with him, he'll come back. And I can push him around again, right? Well, it seems as though that didn't come back. However, it appears as though collision doesn't currently work with the gravity when you toggle it back on. Alright, so that wraps it up for today's video. Do let me know in the comments below if there's something you're struggling with in GameMaker, or there's something you'd like to see in the next video. Until then, never stop learning, and I'll see you in the metaverse.